Hey there, watchmakers out there. Hey, a little bit of energy today. Anyway, what do I got going on today? I have a problem with a Hamilton 17 jewel Lancaster pocket watch. So the problem with this watch, um, it was actually four different problems. So the first problem was I cut a balance staff for this watch. The balance staff was a little too big, so I had to trim it down. Then when I trimmed it, it wasn't trimmed properly. The balance itself was touching the center wheel, so the balance was up too high. So I said, okay, I still got a little room here, so I think I'll take some material off the lower pivot, and that should lower the balance and clear that center wheel. So that was a really good plan. So I went about to do that, and then I realized after I'd finished that, I put the balance back in. I got some ticking happening, but it started slowing down. I was like, okay, what's going on now? And what happened was that the roller table itself, right, ended up too low, and the pallet fork, the opening of the pallet fork, then the top of that was touching the bottom part of the roller table, causing friction. So as it turned, it was scraping against the roller table. So the job here is actually to remove some material from the balance staff to let the roller table slide up a little further. And I did notice there was a slight gap in there between the roller table and where the material is for the balance to sit on, right? So there's a slight gap there, so I should be able to move that up. So let me show you this in a diagram. Okay, here's the diagram. This here is let me just flip this around. It's a wrong-sided diagram. So what I have here, this is the balance staff here, the balance itself, and this is the hairspring, and this is the roller table. So what my first problem was that the center wheel here and the balance, the rim of the balance were actually touching, which is not a good thing. So that was causing friction. I looked at it under my stereo microscope over there, and that friction was just slowing the balance down. So the balance was true to flat and true to round. That was not the issue, and the hairspring wasn't touching anything here, so it was freed up. I think that the balance was still a little bit too long. As I looked over on the balance cock, this is the upper jewel, and that's the cap jewel here. As I looked over on the balance cock, I saw some real estate here, which is a little tiny crack. So I could either shim the balance, which you can do, or just cut this down a bit. So when I cut the pivot down, or the end here where the pivot is, I cut that down a bit and took about maybe 0.02 millimeters off the end here. It lowered this, it freed up the balance, but then my second problem was the pallet fork. The pallet fork was actually rubbing against the roller table, so that's not a good thing. And I could have, as you see here, bent the pallet fork down, which is not a good idea either, because you can crack the pallet fork or cause other problems, and it won't align properly with the impulse jewel. So that was kind of a stupid thought. I was actually thinking of shaving material off the pallet fork here too, so I could create a gap there without friction, because it was fitting nicely. And I said, okay, that's also stupid. So the plan here is to actually remove material, and if you look at this balance properly, let me do some more drawing here. This actually ends up, there's like this and like this, and on the balance staff, and like that, and that's sort of filled in solid block. And right between the block right there and the roller table, right here, is a gap. I wrote that upside down. Anyway, there's a gap there. So put that on the lathe, strip down the hairspring, very carefully take off the roller table, find the right size collet, put the balance all complete with the balance attached, right? Put the balance staff into the lathe, and then cut away a bit of material so that it can move this in the upward direction, move this roller table upward, and it'll cause a gap to happen here, which should free up the pallet fork to swing back and forth, and everything will be nicely freed up. That is the awesome plan that I have, and hopefully that's going to work. So now that you see my awesome plan, We'll see if this works. This is my watch, so I'm not too worried about customers and fingerprints and stuff like that. I did clean it up, and I should be able to get this thing running again. So let's try that out. I know you're anxious to see how the heck I'm going to do this, so let's just get to it right now. To it. Let's get to it. Okay, so the next job here is to remove the balance cock, and I very careful doing that. Grab it, and the technique I use is actually to pull it out, let it dangle and pull it out. I've seen other people take the balance cock and the balance itself and squeeze it with the tweezers and then pull it out that way. I prefer not to do that. I find that to be a bit dangerous and as risking breaking the bottom pivot by doing it that way. And I hang that on my balance tack so that's out of the way. So then after I've done that, I need to loosen the screws in the very top of the balance cock that are holding on the stud for the hairspring. So I find that leaving it on the balance tack is the best technique for that. As I do this, I can put a little bit downward pressure on the balance itself, the balance cock itself, while I actually undo these screws. So it's not going to impact the hairspring. It's not going to cause the balance to bend. And I use a very fine screwdriver to be able to loosen these up. So those are getting loosened right now, and then the next step will be to nudge the stud out of where it's held onto the balance cock. Now that the screws are loose. So this is a technique I also use, which I find is it's less chance of the balance falling or holding. So instead of holding the balance with my fingers, I just slide 2 fingers underneath the balance, close them just a bit so I know the balance will have a place to sit. And also, if you're holding the balance itself and you move it from side to side, there's a potential of the hairspring stretching. So by doing it this way, I just have to reach in with my screwdriver, and then all I need to do then is nudge that stud out of its location on the balance cock, and I can also, it's pretty easy to get it away from the regulator arms too. So there we go, it's out now. Get everything out of the way, and then the next job I have is to remove the hairspring. So finding a nice little spot that fits the roller table diameter, and then put the balance in there as well. Now I've marked the where the hairspring stud is located with reference to the balance itself, and it's on the same side that the impulse jewel will show itself. So all I need to do is take some very, very small screwdrivers. So as you can see, I'm grabbing my the smallest screwdrivers in my set, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to get really close in with these glasses. These are times 15 glasses, and I can just zoom right in with those, and it should work really well. So I'll take one screwdriver, and I'll tip it straight down and underneath the hairspring, and then go up just slightly. I don't want to touch or interfere with the hairspring that much, and I just snug that right up to where the collet is. And I take the other screwdriver on the other side, and I snug that up against the collet as well, and then so where the collet touches the balance arms, I just rotate. If you look on the right hand side, I'm just rotating that screwdriver ever so slightly to wedge it in there, and then just use the screwdriver blade itself to raise up that collet as it gets wedged into place. So, and you just do that with both of them. Once you get them both done, then the hairspring loosens up nicely, and then you don't have a problem. So, and you got to make sure that you don't slip your screwdrivers into the hairspring at any time there, because you're going to ruin that hairspring. So you got to be very, very careful when you're doing this. And then once that's done, D-O-N-E, then you've got to The next trick is to just take that hairspring out of place, and then you've got to figure out how to get that roller table off. So in this case, I got a lot of different tools. I move that hairspring out of the way. I put it onto just a piece of a big piece of pith wood that I have, so it's not going to collect any dirt from that pith wood on the top. So keep that hairspring nice and clean. And then grab that balance very carefully, check the pivots, make sure I'm still okay with all the pivots and there's no issue there. And now I got to remove that roller table. So this little device I have here is a very quick roller table remover, and it works well when you have an old balance where the balance staff has got broken pivots on one side and you are not really concerned with damaging the pivots. The problem with this device is that the stakes that are on top are not completely vertically aligned with the balance staff and the pivot. So if you move that stake left to right or in any direction that's not completely vertical, you've got the probability of bending the pivot on the end of the balance. So this is a new balance staff. So the last that I actually made. So I made this balance staff, and the last thing I want to do is screw with the pivots. I don't want to bend those pivots at all. So the alternative, see, at any angle you could bend it. So the alternative to this is to actually use a staking set, and with that staking set you can ensure that the stake is completely aligned with that. So what I do when I do have an older balance that I got to remove, I put a piece of Rodico underneath the balance staff, so that when it pops down, the lower pivot hits that Rodico and it doesn't break. Because I actually like to have one of the pivots of a broken, like a damaged staff, intact, so I can measure the diameter of that pivot. So when I make my new balance staff, I know if it's a 0.11 millimeter pivot. I know from the original one that the lower one is 0.11 millimeters. Likely the upper one will be the same. Then I can use that as a reference when I cut my staff. I've got some other videos on that I've used to cut the staff, but that just protects the pivot as you tap down on this particular device, and the balance staff is removed. I'm sure I bought this online, and I'm sure this was used in a factory to do a massive amount of pivots. So here I've got my magic roller remover. You guys remember Get Smart, the old magic roller remover, Chief. So this here just ensures that when I put that balance in the magic roller remover, that it's completely, that the stake is completely vertical. So what I'm going to do now is just fit that balance in there and pick the right stake that goes over the pivot. It touches the shoulder that's beyond the pivot on the balance staff, so that I can tap that down. So right now I've got everything in place, all ready to tap that down and see if I can get that balance to move. Now when that balance actually goes down and the roller table stays where it is, the lower pivot will drop into a hole that's in the magic roller remover, and it allows the lower pivot to not get damaged as it's as it goes down into that in the cavity that's in this device. So it's fairly safe. I've used this a number of times. I haven't done a lot of repivoting work when I've built balance staffs. Normally they're pretty good. This one here has just got one. It's an adventure. This one has been a particular adventure for me with all the things I've had to do to adjust it. So I love my adventures, man. I love my adventures. So worst case scenario, if none of this works, I just end up cutting another balance staff and start over again. But you got to learn, and you got to do things over and over again sometimes, and then you learn from what you're doing, and away you go. So I'm going to start tapping on this thing, and not tapping on it too hard. Just tap on it. What I don't want to do is bend the arms on the balance, and if I tap on it too hard, the arms and the balance might warp or something, and you can actually see that when you look at the rim of the balance. You can see one side of the rim no longer aligned with the other side of the rim, and that causes a big issue. So So this one was on fairly tight, so it required some significant tapping to get it off. So there we go. The bounce fell down and the roller table just moved to the left-hand side, and there's the roller table with the impulse jewel intact. I had to make sure that the that the stake didn't interfere with the jewel at all. So otherwise, I'd have to put the jewel back in place, which is it's not super difficult. It's just another job. You got to shellac a jewel in place, and I've made some videos on how to do that if you're interested. I've done a few of those as I've bought some pocket watches that had no jewels and had to fit a jewel in, and that requires a special tool. So just cleaning the pivots off here because there's a little bit of leftovers, and examining the pivots to make sure that they're still intact, no issue, no problem with the pivots. I did run this particular balance on a J-Cot tool to smoothen out the pivots, and I burnished it to actually smoothen and harden the pivot ends, so they're in pretty good shape, and they fit nicely in the jewels, so there's no issue there. So this balance should run quite well. So there's a bit of a close-up here of the balance where right where I'm pointing or trying to point here is the material that I need to take off of the balance staff to allow the roller table to snug in a bit closer to where that where that material is that holds the balance arm. So the opposite of where the balance arms are, there's that material that's there, and I know I could probably remove some material from the balance staff right where I'm pointing there, and allow the roller table to get in closer to that big chunk of metal that's holding on the balance staff. The collar, I could call it, right? The collar that I developed there. So, and I'd put it on before, and it squeezed the blue steeled metal up close, but not close enough. So that caused the issue. So that should be able to, I should be able to do that without a problem. I just need to pick the right collet to do the job. I always make sure that I put the balance on a piece of Rodico before I walk away, so I know that the pivot won't get damaged if the balance is sitting on a piece of Rodico like that. And then move that out of the way in preparation for doing it. So the Magic Roller Remover is a great tool. Can't remember where I got it, probably eBay, but picked that up. It's as magic as it says it is, and it does the job. And I did have to use a stake from the staking set versus the Magic Roller Remover stake to make sure I was clearing the pivot when I actually pounded it out. So now I'm going to put away this mystery tool here and start the work on trimming the material off the balance staff with my Bowley lathe. I think it's a Bowley lathe I'm going to use. So we're going to go in there, and the audio is working on this, so I don't have to overdub, as you probably know I'm doing. The Magic Roller Remover. Magic Roller Remover. All right, here's what happens here. So previously I did another stupid thing where I had the audio for the previous part of this video pointing at the wrong audio, and I didn't get the audio, so I had to dub over what I'd been doing. But in this case here, so as I had said before, what I need to do is remove material from the from this where the roller table actually sits down here. I've got a little bit of material that I've got to remove, so it's actually on this side. So I've got a collet here, which I believe is a 6 or 7. It's a 7. So what I did, I take the hairspring side of this balance here and then tuck that into the collet like that, and then I see if if this thing is going to spin round. It's not too bad. Yeah, and there's just a bit of material I got to remove from this to allow the roller table to get in there nice and tight. So that's pretty good. So now that I know it's spinning true, I just tighten it up here nicely. Check it again. And now I've got to remove material from this part of the where the collet rests in there. So I've got the collet and the hairspring on a piece of wood here. and I know the collet will go in so far now, so I could test that to see how far that goes in. And I did, I'm saying collet, but I meant roller table. So I did push that roller table in before, and I got to redo part of my video because I had a really good front end of it, but there was no audio. So that roller table just goes in like that, and it won't go any further than this without punching it down. So that's good. And I've got just a little bit of material then to remove from that roller table. So let me see if I can just put my fingers down here to remove this. So let's just milk it over a little bit here. Come on. Turn it a bit maybe. What I don't want to do is damage the pivot. That's what I'm really afraid of here. Just take it easy. Everything can be done extremely carefully. Even if this roller table falls off and hits the ground, I'm not too worried about it, but just edge it off and it should fall on my fingers here. There we go. That just fell on my fingers. Just open my fingers up and let it fall down on this piece of wood. So that's the roller table there. So let me get myself some gravers that are good enough for that. Make sure that I'm close enough, or not too close or not too far, that I can work this piece without causing any problems here. So I got to tighten this up a little bit, and then I'll measure the way the graver hits in here so I don't get too far. So just hang on for a second. So I'm going to use a 2mm flat 2mm flat graver here, and I've got them marked in the back. So just they're very, very small, and I'm going to also pick out my 2mm round as well, because I'm going to put those in and see if I can just take that material off a bit to move that roller table up. Alright, here we go. I'm going to remove a little bit of material on there and see what happens. I don't want to remove too much, because then I've got a problem with my roller table actually fitting in. And if the roller table goes too high, then the impulse jewel won't fit in the mouth of the pallet fork, so that will cause other issues. Alright, that might be good enough. If you look down on the actual pallet, the balance staff going down, you can actually see through the background whether there's any ridge there or not. So it looks like I've taken the ridge down here. I'm going to go at it just a tiny bit more here. Alright, that's enough. Now hopefully I've taken enough away. I can clean that up with my Rodico here. And I'm looking at it right now, and I just want to make sure that the pallet, the roller table actually sits in there nicely. So and it doesn't stop again. So when I punch that on, it should be perfect. So I can punch that on now and see where it sits. But I've got to punch it on and then completely reassemble this balance after I've looked at the roller table and made sure that it goes down far enough. So it's a bit of a tricky job, but you knew the job was dangerous when you took it. And like I said before, always take a little piece of Rodico and rest your balance staff on that, and that way you won't bend the pivots. And just take that out of the way, put your lathe away, and carry on from there. Okay, now I've got to reinstall the roller table. So I've got the balance here, and I'm checking where I marked before I took the hairspring off. I actually marked right on the rim of the balance where that stud lines up. So when I put the hairspring down, it's fit perfect. And I picked a stump here for the. Let me see if I can get this right angle. I picked a stump here to put the balance on and fit that in there. So, and before I do that, I've got to line the stump. So just loosen the back here and then push that down and then align that stump so you don't have to deal with that later. So that's aligned, right? Put that back in your good old C1A1 staking set. And I don't want to bend the balance arms at all as I tap this down. So I've got a pretty wide stump here, and it should be able to support it. If I have a larger stump, I'd use it. I don't think I do though. I think that's about as small as it gets in the land of my stumps. Let me check. Maybe this one here is smaller. I want to make sure that fits right through though, so I don't. So I've got a smaller stump here, but I want to make sure that goes right through. And I can just have a look at this stump and see if it's a better solution here. Nope, too tight. So this is the right stump. So I just put that down in there like that. Be cautious, very careful. And I want the mark. I want the impulse jewel to be 45 degrees to the arms, and I want it to be on the same side as the mark here. So I've got a mark right there, and when this is sitting down in the balance cock, the impulse jewel is facing that way. So if I flip this around this way, the impulse jewel should be facing me right now. So I can put that in like this very carefully again, and then grab this roller table I have down here, and let me grab that carefully here and just lay that in there nicely, right? So I'm going to move the whole, I'm holding this, right, but I can move the whole balance or the whole staking set, so when I sit this down it's relatively in the right place. And I just carefully put that on top, like so, like that, and then I'm just going to nudge it to make sure it's 45 degrees. So there's going to be some nudging going on, but I'm going to have to face it this way here. And just make sure that that's 45 degrees before I stake it down. And one thing I should have done beforehand was pick the stake I was going to use to stake it down with. Oh, I think I did actually. I did earlier, so that should be there. And I got to make sure when I put the stake down, it doesn't actually hit the impulse jewel, so I don't have those issues. So I've got the stake down in place. Now let me look at it sideways to see what distance I have to go down. So that looks fairly good there. And I'm just going to tap this down. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to be praying, because I want this thing to go down far enough and so I can clear that pallet fork that I had. So I just let me have a look at how far it's gone down here. Oh yeah, that's nice. That's a lot tighter than it was before. So I'm going to give it a couple more heave-hoes here. Not too much, but there we go. That's nice. Oh yeah, that's in there very nice. So let me see if I can get a close-up for you so you can see the way that's sitting in there. There, as you can see, the roller table is nicely snug up against the collar of that balance and the balance staff that's holding the balance on. So that's a good job. It doesn't look like there's any airspace there at all. So that's fitting very nicely. There you go. That's a nice little picture there. So that moves the roller table up. So that roller table should not be touching the pallet fork now. So that's kind of relieve it so there's no friction between the roller table itself and the pallet fork. So now I need to reassemble the balance on the which means putting the hairspring back on. And as I've done before, I marked the place where the stud on the hairspring needs to be right here, and the jewels on the same side. So as I said earlier, so that's pretty smart. So I find the hole that fits the roller table in there, and just drop that down. And I need to grab that hairspring and then line that up with that little mark there. So very carefully put that hairspring down. See if I can get in here close enough to not screw this up. I think everything you do in watch baking, especially when you're making a video, you're worried about screwing it up. So, alright, so I've got to nudge that over now, because it's obviously not in the right place. So there it is there. That's pretty good there. I'm just going to push with my I can take both sides of my tweezers here and push down on either side of that up close, but just to set it, and then I'm going to use a stake to push it down. So I got to be very careful here that I don't screw things up. Stay away from the pivots. And I just have to nudge it over a bit so it's not too bad. Yeah, that's pretty good there. Now, I think that's actually in place, but I'm going to make sure that it's in place by just using a stake like this. Make sure it clears the pivot and everything else, and go down here and just push down on it. Alright, so that's good. Something feels like it's stuck there when I went in there, but I think that's okay. I checked the pivots on both sides and they're still dandy. And now before I put the balance back onto the balance cock, I'm just going to touch these pivots again with Rodico, just to make sure they're relatively clean. And also the jewel, the impulse jewel here, I believe that there should be no issue because I wasn't really touching that. So, but I'm going to just touch that with Rodico as well. Just make sure there's no issues at all there. I'm really curious whether this will work. And here I've got my my balance cock here. So. And what I've done to do this before, I'm probably going to go off camera and do this, but what I've done is I take my Rodico and I mold it in at an angle, and I've done this on my with my mini bench on top of the table so I can get nice and close. But I'll put it down like this, like so, and then rest the balance down like that. If you can see that at an angle. And then that lets me take this and then just align it. So I push this in like that, and then I align it so it's snugged in there. And I've got to change lenses here because this is really tricky work that probably shouldn't be doing on camera. Because so what I do is get a very small screwdriver. Make some noise as I reach for things, right? Oh God! Get a very small screwdriver, This one here, and I'll help nudge that back and forth, and then I've actually got to tighten those screws on the top as I do this. So I'll see if I can do this on camera. It's not a bad technique. Move these stakes out of the way. This is the screw for the balance cock, and here's the balance here. So. Move these screwdrivers out of the way and make sure I've got a nice grip on this balance cock. because I don't want that to move at all. So get nice and close here and then slide that in. I can't even talk when I'm doing this. So that stud is in there now, and then I gotta take the spring and I move it into the regulator pins. And I've got to make sure that that stud is in there nice and deep. Which it is. And then, using my wrong hand for screwing things, tighten those screws on the top. Not sure if you can see that because I'm probably blocking the video right now. This is where I got to hold the balance cock very tightly. If I lose grip on it, then everything goes to hell in a handbasket. Pretty tight there. Now I don't want to move until I've removed the balance from that Rodico because it'll stretch the hairspring. So I just tap it out a little. And I'd like that to be hanging there, so if I could reach over and find my tweezers, life would be good. There we go. Now I'll put that on top of the balance tack here very carefully. Should probably have switched to other glasses for this. There we go. So now that's on the balance tack. Now I can actually hold that on the balance tack with my finger here while I make sure those screws that hold in the stud are nice and tight. Right, that's not going to go anywhere. That one's good there. That one's good there. So there we go. So that's in now. So that's my technique anyway for putting that back on. It's newly invented. I've had the thing upside down. I've tried to align it. I've tried all kinds of crap, but this situation where I just can create a slope with the Rodico and have the balance at an angle and then just tap it in. And I made I'm tapping the hairspring so it's in between the regulator pins too, so which is really tricky. So now I've got my watch movement here, and I'm just going to touch the pallet fork to see if it snaps back and forth. And you know what? If this, for some reason, this doesn't work, like I'm on video right now and I'm showing you what I'm doing, and if for some reason it doesn't tick, I'll be a bit pissed off, but other than that, I've done all the things I think I should be doing to do that. So that's testing the pallet fork that it snaps back and forth, and this was wound before. So now I'm going to keep this pallet fork on this side, and I'm going to enter the jewel. I'm going to enter it this way and then that way. So I'm going to basically make sure the impulse jewel is on the same side as the pallet fork is tilted, right? So that way I can put the balance cock in properly, right? So let's just lift that up. And I had oiled all this stuff before, so I'm not re-oiling it. So it's going to go in like this, and then I'll twist it, right? That is the plan. So very carefully. This is tricky sometimes. Put that in place like that. And then I'm going to rotate the whole movement around. This is where I do some praying. Oh, I actually saw some movement of the movement. So But I want to make sure that the balance cock doesn't fall into the ground, right? So as I take my tweezers out, I'm just protecting it so it just falls in place. And looks like I got a little bit of a ta-da there. Just hang on. So I got some movement. So what I'm going to do is put that screw in place, and then I'll measure, I'll look at see if I've got some, whether this will actually tick for me. And like I said, if I have issues and it doesn't want to tick for me, I will fix that later. But that's the that was the basic problem that needed to be solved, and I may have to do a little bit more fine-tuning on this before it runs completely well. I also have to make sure that the jewels are in the jewel holes. So look at the balance, the right side, and make sure the jewels are in the jewel holes. So I just tighten this up a little bit. And I got action there, which is excellent, right? So that means it's freed up from there, and I've got potential of getting some amplitude out of this thing. So that was the job right there. I don't actually think I've got friction issues here, so which is good. So it's so that was the job to do this. I think the pivot's out now, and I'm going to have a look at this under the magnifying glass to make sure I didn't screw anything up. Yeah, there we go. It's touchy to do this properly, you know. I don't even think the jewels are in the hole. Alright, there we go. Anyway, it's running a little bit, so I'm going to look and make sure that there's no friction, everything's free. I have this suspicion that I've still got a little bit of a problem when I tighten this down, it might not be aligned properly. So I do have to tighten it a bit more than I'm tightening it now. So should blow it with the blower instead of just to free it up a bit. Yeah, it's freed up a lot more now. Alright, a quick update. So I really couldn't get it moving well by the end of that last video, and so I put it back in the lathe because I realized that the lower jewel was jamming. So now it's freed, and I just move it around a bit so you can see that it's looking pretty good. There you go. That is the test. So I'm going to put the hairspring back on this thing and see if I can get it ticking. Alright, now here comes the test. I did the puff test, see if it was free, and now I'm just going to put it in, and I'm just praying that it ticks. So let's see what happens here. Grab some glasses. Man, oh man, so entertaining. See, after all that adjusting, the lower pivot looked like it was jammed in there or something, but I looked at it in my stereo microscope, and it looked like it needed some material removed. That's all there was to it. Now let's just put this in nice and lightly and see if I can get this thing ticking. Takes a licking and keeps on ticking. It wants to tick right now, and it's not even in. Oh yeah, that's nice. There we go. There it is. It's ticking. So that's the end of the video. So it works now. The lower pivot actually needed a little bit of material taken off of it. Didn't know that. And so I put it back in the lathe, and I took a little material off it, and then away you go. And so it's a beautifully functioning pocket watch.